Hey there, welcome to Charting Toward Intimacy, where we're expanding the natural family planning conversation. I'm your host, Ellen Holloway. All right, here we are, another NFP in real life episode with Kathleen.
Hello, everybody.
Woohoo! I'm really excited to talk about this because this is my life. We're talking about crappy charting.
Two certified crappy charters right here.
Right here. And I think the worst part is I am in a season of life where I'm not allowed to be a crappy charter.
Yeah.
I'm in postpartum. I have to be on top of charting.
Yeah, I will say that postpartum charting does stress me out a lot. And you do feel a lot more pressure because, I'm not a naturally a good charter, I guess.
Yeah.
I am just naturally lazy at it. But that's why I think after my last pregnancy, I switched to Marquette postpartum rules just so that I could use the monitor and just be like, this is way easier for me right now. But then after,
that's like the life of like if you're a crappy charter like us. And well, I think we'll maybe define what we mean by crappy charter.
Yeah.
But like,
yeah.
I see why Marquette is really appealing because it's kind of like a one and done, like for postpartum specifically, because you're not allowed to be a crappy charter during postpartum.
Right. But if it's as easy as peeing on a stick every morning and then putting it in a monitor that tells you this is where you are in your cycle right now, or these are the hormones we're detecting. It's just way simpler. I didn't even chart. I don't think I even kept a chart when I was postpartum and doing Marquette. But I found that once I got my cycles back, Marquette was expensive, number one. And the sticks now, oh my gosh. God bless all of you.
They're crazy.
Who are like committed to Marquette and paying those prices for those sticks. Do what you have to do. I am proud of you. And my cycles, and I think this very much contributes to my crappy charting, is that my cycles have always been pretty regular. There's the few cycles like immediately postpartum when you get them back that, you're kind of adjusting. And so you need to be diligent. And so I think I did stick with Marquette for the first maybe 3 or 4 cycles, after, getting it back. But they regulate then like pretty quickly. And I'm very lucky and blessed, honestly, that I haven't had those difficult cycles that are just kind of all over the place. They're very predictable. Because they're very predictable, I end up either just charting my temp. Sometimes I will chart mucus, but only when I start noticing fertile mucus. Like I'll know when my ovulatory phase starts. I can also always have an idea of like, okay, it's going to start between days 9 and 11 because it always starts between days 9 and 11. So there's no point in me charting, right? Like from day 1 to 8, it just doesn't matter. And then the temp I'll do, but even then, sometimes if I'm really, really lazy, I will just not do my temp until I notice I'm in my ovulatory phase. I'll be like, oh, let me get those temps now so I can like detect.
Oh my gosh. Okay. That's lazier than I've ever been.
That's not all the time, but I can be very lazy.
Yeah.
Like shockingly lazy.
I've definitely done the like, as soon as I confirm ovulation, stop everything. Like,
yes, same.
Because with a symptothermal, like once you have that temperature rise, you can absolutely confirm ovulation. And there honestly isn't any reason to continue charting like that.
I would argue that.
Okay.
And I have in my notes that we can argue that as we go forward. Unless you want to just jump into it now.
Do it.
So
argue with me.
As lazy. Yeah. Okay. I'm going to argue. As lazy as I am, I am fully aware and own up to the fact that it's problematic to be this lazy for multiple reasons.
I think it's really important to note that like,
we're not
encouraging you to become lazy, but we want to encourage you, if you are a lazy charter or a crappy charter, however you want to call it, we have a couple of ideas of ways to kind of get out of that rut. Exactly. And just know that you're not alone in kind of this crappy charting. And you know what, depending on like your family planning intention, like if you're like, yeah, we want to avoid, but it's like not really that big of a deal. We're not trying,
Right.
but, or I mean, we're not trying, but we're not trying at the same time, then yeah, crappy chart, whatever. Like,
yeah, it's like you can loosen the rules. It's fine. You
Yeah.
don't have to, I would say still observe everything.
yeah,
Make sure you're making observations. But if you're not charting it, you're not charting it. Although my argument will still, kind of say that that's not the greatest approach either. Because number one, obviously, first problem with lazy charting is that if you are trying to avoid pregnancy, it's very easy to miss something and you're way more likely to have a user error.
Yep.
That's kind of obvious. But number two, and I've really kind of started to knuckle down on this in my own certification process in becoming a fertility awareness instructor, is that you're not building an entire health record for yourself.
Very true.
So, that's the one thing. Like, obviously, as Catholics, we tend to just kind of associate NFP solely for family planning purposes, which, because it's in the name, natural family planning. But if we look at it as more of a fertility awareness, from a fertility awareness angle, it should be primarily used as a way of monitoring your own health. And in your charting, you are creating a health record that you could bring to your doctor. And, a lot of doctors aren't going to really know what they're looking at when they look at your charts. But if you can sit down and explain to them, hey, look, I only had this many days in my luteal phase. It wasn't between 9 and 18, and that's too short. So yeah, so you can bring this, to your doctor, bring your chart to your doctor and show them, look, my luteal phase was too short. I'm concerned that there's something, because what we've come to realize that ovulation is the 5th vital sign for women.
Right.
And their overall health. So it's really important that we do stick to the charting habits, that we can identify what type of mucus we're having each day. Like, normally, if I'm just having like a dry day, I'll just be like, I don't need to chart anything. When I'm in my lazy mode, it's like, it's fine. I don't need to put anything down for that. But no, like, we need to see or doctors will need to see what kind of mucus are you having throughout the cycle. Right. And it's going to be, if you're just kind of leaving things blank and not consistent, it's going to be really hard to put all that information together to come up with some sort of diagnosis should you have a potential issue. And if you don't really have issues that often, like, praise God, that's a great thing. But also why it's really important to stay in the habit of good charting, so that if something does come up, you've already got it all. You can even look back then on your previous cycles, right? To be like, look, I've always been like this, and now something's changing, and now something's different. So that, I would say, obviously, other than user error, which we all kind of know, would be the biggest problem to lazy charting, is just from a health perspective.
Yeah. I would definitely agree with that. Like, you're not getting that full picture. And that, like, not all doctors are going to be able to actually read that, but from learning, and there's, certain questions you could ask your instructor, even if they're not a medical professional, they can kind of clarify a couple of things that you could then take to your doctor and say, for example, like, my luteal phase, it's hanging out at like 7 or 8 days right now. That's not long enough. I clearly have something wrong. I would like tests done on these specific days. And again, your instructor can kind of talk you through some of those things. Even if they're not a medical professional, of like, these are what you should ask your doctor for. These are what you should talk to your doctor about. So that is a huge problem of crappy charting.
Yeah. And I would even say, like, other issues that are only going to be detected through consistent and good charting habits. I mean, extended like fertile days, right? So maybe you're having like patches of fertile mucus, but they're not consistent. So, I mean, those patches mean you're trying to ovulate, but maybe you're not ovulating, right? So maybe you're having patches, or maybe you're having more than 5 to 7 days of fertile mucus, right? Or 3 to 5 days. Like, all these hosts of things that we really, like, you can only see your cycle day by day.
Right.
But if you have every single day tracked and recorded, you can only see the whole picture of it in retrospect. So, it's important. And any doctor, once they understand what your chart means, whether they're, a NAPRO doctor or whatever, they're familiar with charting or not, if you can explain what your chart means and what you've recorded, they're going to know, oh yeah, that's not a good thing.
Right. Because if you have a low or a short luteal phase, then
yes,
most likely you have a progesterone issue. And so you can specifically say that to your doctor, and your doctor can say, oh, okay, there are things we can do about that.
Right. Exactly.
And there are some tests, some blood work that we can do to determine that. Right. So it's not always the easiest to take your chart to your doctor, but you can take the information that your chart gives you.
Right.
And your instructor can help you figure out what that information is that you need to ask about.
Exactly.
Or if you chart with Creighton or Femme, then you can just go to a specific Creighton or Femme health doctor.
Correct. If you're lucky enough to have them in your area.
Well, that too. Yeah.
Or a virtual visit too.
Well, telehealth. Telehealth is really,
I know, it's come a long way.
Yeah. Because labs can be ordered in telehealth, which is crazy, right? So you can go to a Quest or a LabCorp or whatever. I don't know what's in your area.
We have both of those.
Okay, great. They're national.
All the way across the country.
Fabulous. Yeah, we're on opposite sides of the country. I don't know if y'all know that. I'm in California. Kathleen's in
Pennsylvania. Yeah.
We're almost
way
as
across.
Far. Yeah, almost as far away as you can get. But labs can be ordered in telehealth, and you can go get your labs done at your local Quest, and then your telehealth doctor can see it, which is awesome. So
yes. Yeah, absolutely.
So I've had these seasons where I've been in the charting groove, and I feel like I'm in the charting groove when my cycles they're in a regular, happening on a regular time. And I love that groove. I love when that groove happens, because it's kind of oh yeah, I know what's going to happen. Kind of what you were saying, Kathleen, I know that I'm likely going to start seeing mucus around day 9 to 11. And I love getting in that zone. I think sometimes being in that zone can also lead to crappy charting, because we're oh, I know what's going to happen. I can predict ovulation, which you can't. You can't predict ovulation, guys.
Exactly. I know.
Well, I guess
I get the same way. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I guess you can predict ovulation. You can predict ovulation by reading your mucus sign and saying, oh, look, ovulation is coming soon. You can't predict ovulation on day 1 of your cycle and go, I'm going to ovulate on day 14. That's not possible.
Right. Exactly. Yes. The other thing, what was the other thing I was just going to say about that? Oh, because I am typically pretty regular. If I have an off cycle, then I always get stuck in it. And I know how to chart at this point. So I don't know why I still do it, but I get stuck in this mode where it's oh, no, this isn't normally when this happens. So I should probably just chart this as a fertile day, because I know this is normally a fertile. So I chart what I project sometimes rather than what I'm actually seeing, because I'm always pretty regular. But you do have cycles that are just for stress or illness or whatever reasons, you're just kind of thrown off. And I get in this space, where it's just oh, I'm just going to chart what I know I should be, not what I'm actually seeing.
That is incredible.
And there's so many times and there's so many times that I go to bed that night and I'm just that was stupid. I should just chart what I saw, right? I know that I chart what I see. But it is. I think the lazy charting is most common, probably amongst people who are pretty regular.
Sure. Yeah.
It is. It's just,
because it's oh, okay, my cycle is always like this. So I'll just chart that way. Mm-hmm. I was actually talking to a client about this, because when I teach, I'm you need to chart what you see, not what you think you're going to see.
Right.
And she's
I teach that too. And
she's well, duh, And I'm okay.
Okay. Hey. It's not that easy.
Back a second. It's surprisingly easy to want to chart what you think you should see. And that's a big problem, like what you were just saying, right?
It is.
And so it's actually really important to keep that in mind when you're charting, is chart what you see, not what you think you're going to see.
Right. Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when you're in a rut like this, I have a couple of ideas, things I do, or things I suggest.
I have one.
So what is your one thing that you do when you get into this kind of like crappy charting rut to get yourself out of it?
Yeah. So, my one thing that I'm going to be totally honest, I haven't done, but I should do that I could
do as I say, not as I do.
Do as I say, not as I do. Yeah. Is it's a really good time if your husband is not involved in the physical charting. It could be a really good time to ask him to get involved for accountability purposes.
That's such a great idea. Yeah.
Yes. I mean, and it could be good
at the end of the day. Like, can you, at the end of the day, ask me, don't ask me if it's a green day or a red day. Don't you dare ask me that if I'm in a crappy charting rut. Right. Ask me what I observed today.
Exactly. Ask me what I observed. Ask me if I charted what I saw.
Yes.
That kind of stuff, you know, some of us need to be held accountable for.
And in a non-patronizing way, please.
Exactly.
I'm wagging my finger on the screen. I'm like,
but yeah, it's a good daily push for accurate charting for her. And then accountability in regards to like sharing the load for him. Right. So there's a mutual accountability there that I think could be really, really good.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
yeah, again, my husband is only interested, is it a green day or a red day? Like that's all he's interested in. But you know, I think if I like really only thought of this and like preparing, I was like, that would be a really good thing to do. Maybe I should do that next time I'm in a rut. He would absolutely, he's always looking to make things easier for me and to help me achieve my goals and to hold me accountable in whatever way I feel I need it or he sees I need it. So that would be a way that I know he would be willing to get involved. So I was just like, hey, I'm not doing this right. Could you just help me out by holding me accountable, asking me every day, maybe even like putting it in the app if you want to, or whatever.
Yeah.
Whatever works. But if your husband's not involved and you want them to be involved, that accountability could be a really good thing.
That's so great. So I want to caveat my suggestions with, these are never suggestions that I make at first. These are only suggestions I make when someone comes to me and says, I'm having a hard time charting. I'm having a hard time putting this into my routine. Like, ideally, you would chart all the time correctly. These suggestions are for if you're having trouble with that. Okay. I just need to caveat that. So first off, this one doesn't fall into the category. Phone alarms are really great. You can set like a phone alarm in the middle of the day. Like, hey, have you checked your sensation? And like, kind of like check your sensation, or if your method requires a sensation check, because the sensation checks are one of the hardest things for me to like get into my routine.
No, you're exactly right.
And so like a couple phone alarms throughout the day, you know, maybe one at 9, noon, and 3, and then like at the end of your day, like, have you checked your sensation? Because even if you're not aware of your sensation throughout the whole day, if you are checking a couple of times throughout the day, again, this is if your method requires sensation checks, that's better data than nothing, right? Or that's better data than just once a day. So phone alarms are great. Or also like a phone alarm at the end of the day, like, hey, you need to chart. Because I've definitely, and this happens to me postpartum all the time. If I have a dry day, I forget to chart it because I'm like, oh, it's a dry day. Like,
that's exactly what I do.
Right.
Exactly what I do. Yep, you just don't
maybe I have like 2 dry days in a row. And then I get to like the third day and maybe it's dry too. And I'm like, were those 2 days before dry, or did I see mucus on that? You know, and so
you
like
second guess yourself.
Exactly. I second guess myself. I'm like, and when you second guess yourself, you have to go with the most fertile sign. You have to say, okay, then that must have been a peak day, or, you know, peak fertile type mucus, or what, you know, whatever your method terminology uses.
Right.
And so then that becomes a problem because then there's like more abstinence.
Right.
And so like setting that phone alarm, which is very similar to like asking your husband to help, right? of just like the end of the day, like make sure you put in your app or put on your chart, like whatever you saw today. So yeah, phone alarms can be really helpful.
Yeah. Also, some apps, if you chart in apps, a lot of the apps will have a reminder setting in them. So the app can actually then pop up and just remind you. You just set the time you want it to remind you.
Yeah. And that's perfect. That's really
Fem has it. Yeah.
I don't know if Read Your Body has it.
I don't know either. I
wouldn't be surprised if that's in a future release though, because they're always like innovating their app and doing all sorts. They're doing great stuff with their app. And then so on sort of a similar note, if you are charting in an app and you are particularly, this happens to me a lot in postpartum, that like, I don't always have my phone on me because like there's babies and children running around and like things going on. And so like when I'm in the bathroom and I see a certain type of mucus, I don't have my phone on me in order to chart that. And then I'm like, oh, okay, I'll just like put that in when I get to my phone next. And I can't remember by the time I get to my phone.
Yes.
Or I can't remember at the end of the day, what all did I see today?
Mm-hmm.
How many times did I see it? What was its quality? Blah, 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 whatever you need to chart for your method. And so one of the things I really suggest to postpartum clients is every bathroom in your house, if you have 2 bathrooms in your house, get a little notebook and put it on the back of the toilet. Write the date.
That's a good idea.
At the top of the notebook, and just when you're in the bathroom, write down what you see. And then at the end of the day, go look at your notebooks and then chart what you see.
That's a great idea.
That can kind of help with that overwhelm.
Yeah.
And so then you can chart the most fertile sign that you saw and then, flip the notebook to a new page. But the most important thing to do, if you use this notebook method, put the date on the top of the page.
Do not forget.
Do not forget to put the date on the top of the page. Very, very important.
Yeah.
And then something else that really helps is if you're charting on your phone, if you're charting on an app, taking your phone to the bathroom and charting it immediately. So again, like if you can't take your chart to the bathroom, then I highly suggest this notebook method. If you chart on paper charts, then like keep your paper chart in the bathroom, in the one that you go in the most. Or if you just have one bathroom in your house, like just keep it in that one bathroom. That can be really helpful. I know sometimes people are like, oh, keep the chart on the bedside table. But like, I can't remember what I saw at the beginning of the day when it comes to like
no, exactly.
8 p.m. or 9 p.m. Okay. So those are all great suggestions for like charting all the time. Now comes the suggestions that are for only if you're in a really bad charting situation. All right. So this happens to me a lot with postpartum clients. Is that charting all of those mucus signs, like charting the mucus sign throughout the day, charting the sensation throughout the day is like, it's really hard to do it every time. And what happens a lot is bathroom. You get in the bathroom, you got to go, you have 3 seconds before the baby starts screaming again. Right. And you don't have time to wipe before and after you go. Or like you've been holding it for 3 hours and again, you don't have time.
Mm-hmm.
So what I suggest is start with 1 time a day, right before you go to bed.
Yes.
Chart that, because charting once is better than charting nonce. I wanted that to rhyme so badly.
I like that word.
That's one great good observation is going to be better than no observations. And then once you're in that habit, so let's say you pick the first time that you go to the bathroom, when you wake up, you pick that. Okay. Now add the last time that you go to the bathroom. Then it becomes a routine. Then you start checking every time you go to the bathroom. Then you're able to build on that and get better and better and better data. Because what you're looking for is good data. We want good data so that we can make good, like observations and use the rules correctly. If you're charting crappily, you are not giving good data. You're not making good observations and you're not giving good data. The better the data, the more accurate our method is going to be. And so pick once a day, start with that. And then my other suggestion when people feel kind of overwhelmed, and like the method that I teach symptothermal, and it involves a sensation check, a tissue check, and taking your basal body temperature. If that's all overwhelming, all three of those are overwhelming, I suggest, okay, pick one
Yes.
and chart it perfectly.
Yes.
Because there are protocols. If your method requires a couple of different biomarkers, your method is going to also have protocols for just one of those. Like symptothermal methods have a temperature only protocol.
Right.
And so I suggest, okay, let's start with, for example, let's start with basal body temperature.
Yes.
And yes, the efficacy rate is going to be a little bit different because this is a different method. But if that's okay with you, and this is going to help you get to a point where you have really, really good data, then let's use that. Let's do a temperature only method for a little while.
Yeah.
And that's okay. And let's have our temperature be perfect. And then let's add in the mucus observations.
Right. Yeah. No, I think that's a really good point. Yeah. And, I think I will say the one caveat to that is to maybe, like I said earlier, still, even if you're not charting them or writing them down or, perfectly, make those observations still in your head. And this is, something that, that I know people who, have gone from like trying to avoid to just like kind of open, a little more open, like not exactly trying to conceive, but they're just kind of doing whatever. And they would say they would do this exact same thing. Like for some of us who have been charting for so long, it's almost hard to not observe. It's like so a part of your daily habit and routine that you're always, it doesn't even matter. It's like you could be like in your luteal phase and you're still like looking at the tissue and observing. It's like, there's nothing else to look for.
Yeah. And you're like dry for days and days, but you're still like looking at the tissue and you're like,
exactly,
I need to pinch something off of there.
Exactly. So I think the point that you made is really important, that efficacy rates are going to change if you're only charting one thing, but still do your best to make the observations at least, because with temperature, especially, you're not going to have any sign if you're not looking at mucus, if you're not at least observing it, that, that you're in your ovulatory phase.
Right.
So, that could be, again, maybe if it's too much, if it's too overwhelming, if life's too crazy, like we get it. It happens.
It happens all the time.
Okay. So maybe don't feel the pressure to like put it down on the chart, but make the mental note of what you're seeing so that, okay, the next week or whatever it is going to kind of be all red light.
Right. Cause when you're in the postpartum time and you're using a method, like a mucus only method, or you're using a symptothermal method, which basically turns into a mucus only method, your basic rule is going to be peak plus 4. Like that, it's pretty much across the board. Like you're looking for peak plus 4. So like, I think a lot of times what happens to me is if I see peak mucus, I'm like, okay, like we're done for a few days.
Yeah.
And so then I like get in this mindset of like, I don't really need to chart for the next couple of days because like I'm done anyway, but I could see more peak mucus. So it's like, it's really important to not just like write it off. Like
exactly.
And I think that happens to me too when I'm cycling, is like, as soon as I see the like peak mucus or egg white mucus or like whatever your method calls it, I kind of like, I'm like, I'm done. Like I saw that like most fertile type mucus, like that's all I need to try.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right.
But please don't do that because I think for the most part, for me, like crappy charting results in more abstinence.
Yes.
Which is like not helpful.
Right. So again, no one here is encouraging.
No, we're not encouraging crappy charting.
It's just kind of a bad idea all around, but it happens because life happens. And, a lot of us have kids and it's really hard. Look, I have got one demanding his 3rd pack of gummies from me at this very moment. So sorry for all the background noise today, friends. The 2-year-old is just on a rage. But yeah, we have kids, right? And like, you're not guaranteed to get anything done or to remember to do anything when you've got kids running around like this all day. So, it happens and we get into the ruts, and there are certain seasons where you've just got so much on your plate that things get overwhelming. And literally the last thing you can feel motivated to do is chart. Yeah. But like I said, even those mental notes think your point was really good about, maybe just choose one, choose like, the one thing to chart. But if you're still making those mental notes, when you go to put down that one thing, by taking the pressure off of yourself to write down everything, you might find yourself being like, oh, but I know I observed this, so I can just put that down while I'm here too.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden, when you just take the pressure off of yourself, you might end up just naturally charting better anyway.
That's a really, really good point. When you take that pressure off, it almost becomes easier.
Exactly.
Yeah. And, I think one more thing I want to say before we like close out is, if you find yourself feeling overwhelmed by charting, reach out to your instructor. Yes. Because they will also have, additional ideas for you, that are more method specific. Cause we were kind of like talking just generally. Right. And so like when you're in one of these kind of crappy charting ruts, it's a great time to reach out to your instructor. And if you don't have an instructor, it's a great time to find an instructor and, set up like most instructors. If you're like, hey, I already know this method, like, I just want, I just need like a refresher. They'd be happy to set up like an hour consultation with you or a half hour, like, whatever you need. So reach out to instructors when you're in this kind of a rut, because they can also be really, really helpful. And they can also be really encouraging too. I think a lot of times too, I'm in constant communication with clients that I know are having a hard time charting. And I'm like, okay, here's what I want you to do for 1 week. And I'm going to check in with you in 1 week and we're going to see how you're doing. And then then we're going to add something, or maybe we're going to take something away, or, and so like, depending on the instructor, like they can help you through that. And be your cheerleader with you.
We all need a good cheerleader, don't we?
We all do.
I think good points all around.
Anything else you wanted to add about crappy charting?
I don't think so. Yeah, no, just don't do it if you can. Just don't. It's not worth it.
Yeah, it is not worth it. Crappy charting is not worth it. Yeah, absolutely.
But again, life happens, and don't beat yourself up if it does. You just, hopefully a couple of these little tips will help you through.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, be sure to follow Charting Toward Intimacy on Instagram. If you have questions for either Kathleen or I, reach out to me, Instagram, or send me an email. Links to those are in the show notes. Until next time.
Bye.